When Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine, he said that he had no choice. Now, I want to use this idea as a sort of angle to question the sort of comments which are often being left under my videos, and the sort of comments which are being left under other videos on YouTube, and they're the sort of comments which I hear regularly on Russian media. So these things need to be challenged, and we need to avoid getting into a sort of Yahoo name calling session. We need to look at these things very calmly and very clearly and almost philosophically. I was going to say logically, but logic isn't really my forte. But calm, clear, considered, and I hope kind analysis is what we need to look at. So Mr. Putin said he had no choice but to invade Ukraine. He tried, in that phrase which is repeated again and again, he tried to pin the blame for his invasion of Ukraine on the West and on NATO and actually on Ukraine itself. He had no choice. Not my fault, Gov. It's absurd, and it's been repeated again and again and even repeated on my YouTube channel by people who are making comments. And I welcome those comments. I really welcome those comments, because we've got to get these things out into the open if we're to have this debate properly, and if we're not just simply going to be slagging slogans from one side of the fence to the other. That gets us nowhere. So Vladimir Putin claimed, with incredibly scant evidence, we haven't seen that evidence. If you've got that evidence, show it. He claimed with very, very poor evidence that a genocide was taking place in Ukraine, and that he was forced, therefore, to step in and stop it. His invasion of Ukraine included mass bombing as far as Lviv, in the far west of the country, not in the east where the alleged genocide was taking place. Attempts to seize nuclear power plants all over the place, not in the east where the attempted genocide was taking place, or where the alleged genocide was taking place, and seizing airports, and apparently an attempt to invade the capital. So all of this is disproportionate. And if anybody's read their Thomas Aquinas, they would know where I would go with that. I'm not going there, by the way. So what else could Mr. Putin have done? How much sense does it make for him to have attacked? Did he really have no choice? What else could he have done? And that's really the point. Well, first, he could have collected evidence of these crimes and pursued legal avenues and documented these crimes. If they're documented, where is that evidence? I don't see any. He could then have supported legal action within Ukraine, referring cases to the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, the European Court of Human Rights, and so on. So there's so many of these institutions. Mr. Putin may have contempt for them, but they exist. And they exist for precisely this reason, to sort out international allegations and claims, to get to the bottom of these allegations without it coming to bombing. That's what they're there for. If this failed, he could still have used non-lethal force, non-lethal action such as deploying sanctions against Ukraine, and he could have used quite significant sanctions. After all, he controlled the oil going into Ukraine. He's already tried that before. He could have applied these sanctions until Ukraine stopped their alleged crimes. Russia could have lobbied Belarus to join in, or even Europe, or particular countries in Europe, to deploy the same sanctions to put pressure on Ukraine without risking any innocent deaths, to make sure that Ukraine stopped its alleged genocide. He didn't try any of this. Is this because he didn't have enough evidence? If this failed, Mr. Putin could have presented his evidence to the United Nations Security Council and deployed what is his vast diplomatic corps to secure a Security Council resolution launching a fact-finding or a peacekeeping mission into Ukraine, I should say. But he didn't do this. Is it because he didn't have this evidence? What instead Russia did was to invade. Russia failed to provide evidence of crimes to garner any support from other countries. But he still could have referred the case to the Collective Security Treaty Organization. That's a sort of Eastern NATO that brings together 6 former Soviet states, and together they could have sent a peacekeeping mission, a police investigating mission, a mission of observers to monitor and prevent the alleged crimes in Ukraine. But he didn't do that. These options and more, so many more, were actually available to Mr. Putin at the beginning of this year. But instead, he chose to launch a poorly prepared, full-scale invasion with the indiscriminate shelling of residential areas across Ukraine. Full-scale, without warning, without looking at all other options. And it's absurd to think that Mr. Lavrov would not have cautioned him. It is obvious that Putin was not forced to take this step. What he did was his choice. He was not forced into it at all. Anyway, look, I'd be very interested to hear what you've got to say about that and whether or not you agree with it. And I'd be particularly interested to hear from those people who seem to be pursuing a particular Russian pro-Putin, pro-Kremlin agendum. I'd like to hear from you.